So we focused largely on the agricultural production, but there's also an urban component to this as well that deals with the urban nutrient management. So we've got about 35 million acres in the area, about 10% of the total Chesapeake Bay watershed that's urban. And that urban area, I just had the guys come out and, well, I didn't have them, they came out because they have a contract and they showed up yesterday and put fertilizer on our lawn. Have this discussion about how to do that and when to do that, and I've had it with them, trying to manage the fertilizer use in the lawn itself. So one of the things is that this land urbanization, again, if you use ChemLawn or go to buy Scott's lawn fertilizer from Home Depot or Lowe's, you put fertilizer on your lawn to grow the grass, how much of that gets assimilated into the soil and the grass? So how efficiently is that nitrogen and phosphorus used? So there's a whole bunch of different factors that are going to affect that. Anything from how much nitrogen and phosphorus you actually put down, so the more you put down, the less percentage-wise it's going to uptake. Okay? But likewise, if you starve the soil to where the points where the grass begins to die off, you can also get more loss of nitrogen and phosphorus because you actually have more soil erosion if the plant cover isn't there. So I've told you before about my muddy lawn, right? My dog goes out, runs around, kicks up a lot of dirt, gets all muddy, brings the dog into the house, but we live on a slope bank, and when it rains, that soil can run off and go into the watershed as well. And that soil is going to contain nitrogen and phosphorus. So how do we manage the lawn to keep the grass there, to keep the erosion down, but not over-fertilize so that we have excess nitrogen and phosphorus on the lawn as well? So it's a balance. It's not that you should fertilize or shouldn't fertilize. It's a more complex answer than that. It's what's the appropriate amount of fertilizer to minimize the nitrogen and phosphorus going into the Chesapeake Bay. So that's going to depend on a lot of different factors. Again, people have studied this within the bay and looked at exactly how much fertilizer do people put on their lawn. What are the ranges? What are those rates? Is it the right rate? Too much, too little? There are a bunch of different studies on that, trying to sum up what's the average lot size. How do we come up with the numbers to do this? And people have gone through, and this is a detail-oriented study where you go through. I know the junior design group is doing that now, right? You're looking at land use, looking at maps, trying to figure out how big is a lot, how many lots are there, going through counting each individual one and coming up with those areas and land types. It's a tedious process, and when we do that, we go back to the literature and begin to look at how much fertilizer is put on a given lot type for a given land size, coming up with a mass accounting rate for the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus that's put onto the site. So we can actually have these numbers, Gail. So that's where these numbers come from. The rest of the class, we go out, we ask questions, we look at land use, fertilizer use rate, and then we try to come up with, along with the land use, what does the lot cover look like? This reminds you of the CN number that we just talked about. So what does that look like in terms of how the runoff is affected and the loading rate, and then come up with equations for mass loading rate of nitrogen and phosphorus to those lawns based upon fertilizer rate in the urban area as well. So now we've covered the two big sources of non-point source pollution. Again, just kind of waving some hands at it, but the numbers are available to add up the agricultural production from livestock and from field use for nitrogen and phosphorus, and from home use, how much nitrogen and phosphorus is put on the land. How is that land use? We get from map type information from going out and doing those surveys. Now we need to look at what happens to that nitrogen and phosphorus once it gets put on the land.